Welcome to episode 78 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 who are pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. Today I will be speaking with a woman from Alberta, Canada, who understands how life throws curveballs at people. In fact, she has had to contend with several rather significant issues that actually derailed her sense of purpose. Gail Taylor is a songwriter by nature, so when she published her second book, appropriately titled Curveballs, she combined her love for writing with her love for music by adding a QR code at the end of each chapter. Readers can scan the code, which opens up a web page for people to watch a music video of a song as well as read its lyrics. She calls it the first book with a soundtrack, and she might be right. The first curveball came at the age of 12 when her father passed away. Because he was a minor living in a company-supplied house, Gail's mom had to pack up their 6 children and find a new place to live a few months later. But moving to the city proved to be a living hell for Gail, who started experimenting with drugs and alcohol to mask the pain of her father's death. 10 years later, Gail woke up one day hungover and in a real mess. That's when she decided to pursue personal growth and peak performance. She became a successful financial advisor for 25 years, but never really dealt with her addiction. She would work long hours and party just as long into the night while babysitters raised her son. Because of the example Gail set for her son, he followed down the same path of addiction before he was a teenager himself. That really got Gail's attention and forced her to get help for herself and her son. Her life changed again when Gail was 58 years old and started taking piano lessons. Within a few years, she had left her finance job, started her own music company, and became a public speaker. To tell us her story about the long road she followed to overcome an opioid addiction for herself and her son, please welcome Gail Taylor, the author of Curveballs, to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Gail. I really appreciate the time. I understand you're coming out with a new book here in a couple of weeks called Curveballs. I'm intrigued by that title. What's it all about?
Oh, thanks. And thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate being here. Curveballs is actually, the book has 2 genres and music in it. So it's a little bit of my memoirs, and it's a personal growth and peak performance book. So what I do is I share stories of things that I experienced in my life, and some of them were pretty serious curveballs. So I share stories, and then I share tools that I use to work my way through this and put myself in a position where I live my best life. And I have had some pretty serious curveballs, as I'm sure I'll come out in this interview. But at the end of I'm a songwriter, so at the end of every chapter, there's a QR code that you can go on to, and it'll take you to the song and the lyric video of a song that I wrote that was inspired by the story in the chapter.
How cool is that?
I know, there's a soundtrack in my book.
Yeah, you're the first author I've ever interviewed who has a soundtrack in her book, so that's really cool. What were some of the curveballs that you had to contend with?
It started with, my father died when I was 12 years old, so that was the first curveball. And we were brought up in a small town in northern Ontario, and there was 6 kids. So what happened, my mom was in her mid-30s, and she had to move. He was a minor, and they gave her till the end of the school year to get out of the house. So now we've got a single mom, 6 kids in her mid-30s. She's trying to figure out how to keep us together and off of welfare. So she moves us to a city where she can get a job. But unfortunately for me, I got swallowed up by the city. I was so traumatized by my father's death that I pretended he was still alive for 2 years.
Oh, my.
I pretended he was a spy for the government, and they had to pretend that he died for everybody's safety. And one day he was going to come back in the front door, and in the year I was 12 and we were in the city, I started experimenting with alcohol and drugs and reckless behavior. At 12.
Wow.
I know I was just so messed up. And it took me 10 years before I even started to get out of my dysfunctional life. So that was the first curveball.
Were you close to your father?
Yeah,
Yes.
I was.
Okay.
I was very close. Like we had, okay, you'll get my reference. We had the Leave It to Beaver lifestyle.
Okay.
Mom and dad loved each other, small town, real happy, everybody. So yeah, I was very close to him and didn't know how to handle it at that age.
That's
at that age.
Yeah, that kind of trauma can really impact people because it strikes so early in the foundational years of your development. I can understand why you would have delved into things like alcohol to try and ease that pain, but that just creates more pain. And you eventually dealt with it?
Yeah, what happened was about 10 years later. I just woke up one morning and I thought, I was pretty hungover and rough shape. And I thought, man, there's got to be more to life than this. Like I had a mess. I had a mess in my house. I had a mess in my soul. And I thought, there's got to be more to life than this. And that was actually a bottom for me. That was a first turning point. And I decided that, okay, I'm going to try to figure this out and get out of this situation I'm in. And this is when I started on my journey of studying personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been studying personal growth and peak performance for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've read all the books, I've done the seminars and the courses. And it's been amazing because I tell people now that I come from a place of healed scars, not open wounds.
Absolutely.
Right? And so my life is great. And so what happened was at that point in my journey, I started with Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. A lot of your audience have heard of this book or read it.
Absolutely. That's right.
And so that was my starting point. And I decided, what does a 20-something-year-old dysfunctional person want? Money, right? I wanted financial independence. What else do you want at that age? And I started down the journey of, okay, how do I create this life that'll give me financial independence? And so I started studying what was out there, and I became a financial advisor. I started in real estate, and then I became a financial advisor for 25 years.
Wow.
And I was really good at it. I was in a brokerage house. I managed high net worth individuals, retirement portfolios, and I did that. I did it for 25 years. I became financially independent. I helped my clients become financially independent, and got onto this journey. But there was another curveball in there.
Okay.
I better share this one with you. I still didn't know I was an addict. I was using mind-altering substances every day, but I was functional. So I hadn't figured out that I was an addict. And so for that first 10 years, and unfortunately for my son, I also had a 3-year-old son at the time. In my 20s. I had him at 21, so I was probably about 24 when I started to turn things around. And so what happened was it was now the 80s, and it was the me generation. Everybody worked hard, played hard. Money was that was what everything was all about. So what I used to do was I'd work long hours, and then I would go party. And I would hire really good babysitters and caregivers that just loved my son and took good care of him. But I didn't spend a lot of time with him. And that's not what parenting is all about. It's not. I would think, I spend some time with him and it's quality time. So that's all that matters. I didn't realize that quantity. I was still too naive, too stupid.
It was a big trend back then, was this whole idea of quantity or quality time. It's just a way for parents to assuage their guilty feelings that they were ignoring their kids by spending quality time with them. Right.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was doing. I was ignoring my kid. And then he turns 12 years old, and not being any of the wiser, I moved him across the country. I put him in a new school. I introduced a new man into his life. And guess what? He followed he spiraled. He did the exact same thing I did.
Wow.
And just spiraled. And he went heavy into active addiction. he ended up as an opioid user. And like, I share his story with his permission. He gave me permission. He's in recovery now and has been for several years. And he's one of my best friends.
Aw.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We're quite close. But he started spiraling. And it wasn't until then. So now we're almost 20 years into my own use. It wasn't until then, Greg, that I actually really thought, okay, I got to stop using every day if I'm going to help this kid. I got to figure this out. What's going on here? Mm-hmm. And so that was really the first time. That was my second bottom, we'll say. And that was the first time that I really realized you're an addict. It was like a combination of him struggling and me buying a book that said, "Are you an alcoholic?" And I answering all the questions. And interestingly enough, none of them had to do with how much you drank. Mm-hmm. They all had to do with, do you only socialize in activities that have alcohol? Do you structure? Like, it was all that type of question. And so quite interesting. Yeah. So that was the second major curveball, is getting myself clean and trying to live through the years of my son being in active addiction.
Do you just have one child?
No, I have a daughter as well. I have two of them.
Okay.
And she came later. I didn't have her till I was 30. And now she's actually a financial advisor.
Oh, that's fun.
So yeah, she's doing great. She's actually with a company that's out of your country, Edward Jones.
Okay.
She works for them. And so, yeah, she's doing great. And she has two little kids. So I've got 2 grandchildren with her and 3 with my son.
And does she live near you?
So yeah, he lives in the same city as me.
Super.
He lives across the country. Him and his 3 live on the other side of the country, but I make sure I go there as often as I can.
That's neat. So 2 major curveballs. Your dad died, and to assuage that guilt, those bad feelings, you went to alcohol for comfort. And then you contended with that for 20 years. And because you never really got healthy, your son wound up in that same situation. And that would be really, I would think, a contributing factor to guilt on your level. I contributed this because of the choices that I made and the decisions that I made. And
absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm actually glad you brought that forward, because what the next chapter of my life. So here's what happened, and I'm going to circle back to what you just said. When I was 58 years old, I started taking piano lessons, and I had no music background at all. But I don't know why. I just decided I'll start taking piano lessons. Actually, I do know why, but that's another story. So a couple of years into it, Greg, I am loving it. And I am loving it so much so that I thought, I'm going to retire earlier than I planned, and I'm going to study music full time. So I sold my practice when I was 61, and I started studying music full time. And Berklee School of Music, because you don't have to audition for their online courses. A good thing, because I didn't have the talent. So I'm studying through Berklee and private teachers, and for a couple of years, bass guitar, songwriting, keyboards, ear training, the whole gamut. And I'm loving it. And so 2 years later, I think, maybe I'll reinvent myself as a musician. And when I shared that story, so many folks said to me, "Oh my God, Gail, that's so inspiring. I'm going to go do something they had put on the back burner." And a lot of them were in our age group, right? And so it was just so cool to hear these people over and over again say they're going to start something. And I know for a fact some of them followed through. And that was the point where I thought, whoa, never mind being a musician. I'm going to come out of retirement, start up Gail Taylor Music, and I'm going to become a keynote speaker and share my journey and my stories and my tools and help folks become their best selves. And that was when I made that decision. Oh, of course, it was in 2020 I made that decision.
Of course.
And so when I made that decision, one of the speeches and one of the topics that I speak about is addiction, and it's directed to the loved one. It's called Be Your Own Wings. And I actually wrote a song called Be Your Own Wings. I have such a soft spot in my heart for the loved ones of addicts. And it's all about giving yourself permission to be happy, even though you're on a parallel journey with somebody that's hurting, right? You might have missed a few steps like I did, which this is bringing us back to the guilt thing. So you might have missed a few beats like I did and say, okay, so the kid came by it honestly. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether or not you had any influence on it or no influence on it. It's their journey and you don't get to control it. You can be there for them, but you have to have, now we're going into addiction talk, you have to have your boundaries. You have to understand enabling, codependency. You have to get a grip on what you're doing that is doing more harm than helping them, right? Giving them money to pay for their rent so they can use their money to buy drugs isn't helpful, right? Learning these things. And it seems to be the area that there's the least amount of support is for the families, right? Helping the families. Addiction is a family disease. There's no question. The drama's for everybody. It's not isolated to the addict. And a lot of the addiction behavior, it becomes very self-centered and very selfish. If you don't give them money, then they hate you and they call you out for everything you ever did wrong.
Yep.
Right? That's just the reality of it. So you have to learn, in my case, it was not to take those calls. You can call me anytime you want to tell me that you've hit bottom and you want me to get you in a rehab, and I'm your advocate. I'm in there and I'm going to do everything I can, but you can't call me to ask for money and then yell at me because I made mistakes. That's where
a boundary.
Yeah, that's a boundary. Absolutely. And so that ended up being, that's one of my speeches. One's empowering women and the other one's leveling up people in the corporate world that want to get to the next level. Hey, I lived in that world for 25 years. And I was at a point in my financial career where my income was in the top 5% of my country, the top 10% of your country.
Wow.
Like I was good at my job and I loved it. I had steered it to responsible investing. And so that kept the passion and purpose in place.
You had mentioned how you had fallen in love with music rather late in life. I wondered, were you interested in music as a child?
So I wasn't, but what happened was, like every other teenager, I got into it in my teenage years. And we're talking the 70s, right? So that's when all the concerts are going on and Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, and Alice Cooper. And so I went out to all the concerts. I had a ton of albums. I listened to music. I loved it. And then when I became a financial advisor, I lost it for 25 years, even as a listener without even realizing it, because I started to listen to books when I got in the car to go to work. Right. Instead of listening to music on the radio, I was listening to audiobooks on economics. I took it out of my life without even knowing. And I think that's what happened. The 25 years later, when I started to play, all of a sudden, it flooded back into my life as a listening thing. And I'm there, whoa, music is healing. Music is so healing. And Harvard put out a study that said that it brings down stress, it reduces anxiety, it creates focus. And so, yeah, being able to use it now to help people with their part of their journey, that's huge for me.
Right. A lot of people listen to audiobooks in the car because they turn their vehicles into universities. So they figure, I'm just sitting here, I might as well learn something while I'm driving to work or driving across country. What they don't realize is that music gives them a chance to recover from the information overload that's impacting our country today. So people need that time with music. Music just brings a calming to the soul. That with infants, right? They're screaming and you turn on the music or you sing to them and automatically they start calming down.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it does. And then along the journey, when I started that Gail Taylor Music Company, I had an entertainment lawyer. And he said to me, look, Gail, if you want to be a keynote speaker, you got to write a book. And I thought, okay, I can do that. And I had actually written one before in the year 2000. I was teaching a course for the university here, the University of Alberta's Faculty of Extension. And it was called Introduction to the Financial Markets. And I couldn't find a book that I wanted to use as a reference point. So I wrote one. And so that was my first book, and that was 25 years ago. Different world, I tell you.
Yes, no kidding.
Especially when it comes to the whole distribution, and oh my God, what a different world.
That's right.
But so when he said that, I said, okay, no problem. I can do this. I can write a book. And so I started a book about a year ago, and it's being released on November the 1st.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's how it came about. And my biggest thing, the message throughout the whole book is, look, folks, if I can do it, so can you. I had a lot of curveballs. I messed up a lot. There were a lot of challenges. And you know what? Just using the tools in this book, I'll work my way through it. And I didn't invent any of them. I didn't go reinvent anything. This book it's about 40 years of studying, whether it's Napoleon Hill or Tony Robbins or Gay Hendricks. I studied and read them all and just share all the things that worked for me.
You had mentioned that other people would come up to you and say, oh, you're such an inspiration because you're pursuing this new direction, or you're what you call it, reinventing yourself, and you're age 50 or after you turn 50. I think that happens a lot. People don't realize that they can do it because they often have this thing inside them early in life as a child or a teen or a young adult that they feel called to do, or that gives them a lot of energy and hope and something they want to pursue, but they're talked out of it for more practical reasons. Or life happens. They get pregnant and your focus shifts for 18 years as you deal with the children, right? And this age, over 50, is an opportunity for people to go back and look at those things that really inspired them and fired them up earlier in life. And now, with more time and less responsibility, technically, without kids out of the house, it's a great time to pursue this. What do you think?
I think you are dead on. I refer to it as living with passion and purpose. And yes, a lot of baby boomers did not do that first time around. And I think that was a mistake.
Correct.
We spend over 50% of our waking hours at our jobs. And I think it's really important that you find a job that puts a bounce in your step.
Yes.
And I've had people come up to me and say, yeah, but the single mom with 3 kids that's just trying to put the groceries on the table and pay the rent, they can't do that. And I'm there. Imagine what that person would be like at the end of the day when they walk in to see their 3 kids, if they had a job that they love.
Exactly.
They would be a whole different person.
Yep.
And that's like my philosophy is find a job that you're passionate about. Find something that puts that bounce in your step. I don't care if you're 20 years old or 55 years old. I think that's a really important piece. And I talk about it in the book in the context of, even though it might seem like it's a little bit abstract, I always say, look at all the things that you love. Okay, I'll throw one out at you. My son works in pest control, and he loves his job, and he is really good at it. Because what happens is he goes into the home and he explains to the person who's dealing with cockroaches or bed bugs or whatever, look, this happens. Here's the process for us to get rid of it. You'll just be out of your home. And then he gives them peace of mind to go back to their homes. So he has a purpose. He's really helping people go through a curveball, right? He's helping them through that curveball, and he's not bothered by them like cockroaches and bed bugs. When I ask him about it, don't you worry about them getting on you? He goes, no, Mom, they don't bother me at all. Now, that job would be my worst nightmare. He loves it. That's the point I'm trying to make. It can come in any shape and form. Like what some people love sometimes it's a matter of two people should switch jobs, right? Those two single moms, both of them have a job that they hate. If they switch jobs, they both have a job that they love, right? Use your imagination, get out of the box. And whether you're a baby boomer starting chapter 2 or chapter 3, or whether you're a young person, university students now, I talk to them and they seem to think they're not allowed to miss a beat. They have to know right now what they want to do for the rest of their lives.
It's a shame, right?
Oh, it is. I'm saying, come on, guys. You're going to want to be something different in months from now. Don't get so hard on yourself. Figure out what you want to do right now and do it, and then change directions when it's time.
That's right. You made a great point when talking about having a job gives you a spring in your step. My folks were divorced when I was 8, and I lived with my mom and my sister, and she had a job that was not at all inspiring to her. And she would come home at night exhausted and just take a nap. And that just left us without a mom for a couple more hours until she recovered from that. And I could imagine if she had a job that she really loved and that really looked forward to, where she was making a difference in the lives of others and was fueling her up, she would have been an entirely different woman when she came home from work.
Yeah. And I'm glad you shared that, because I always tell folks that my story isn't any different than anybody else's. Mm-hmm. Everybody has had their own version. There's no such thing as Leave It to Beaver. I know everybody that's listening has had curveballs thrown at them, and some might have had nothing to do with addiction. But come on, there's not too many folks out there that have lived, especially baby boomers that have lived as long as we have and haven't had some serious challenges. It's not the curveballs that matter. It's what you do with them.
Right.
And what you do with them and the timing that you do with them, how long it takes you to work through whatever it was that was thrown at you. But working through it instead of living with those open wounds for decades is the key.
I talk to people all the time who say, I haven't had any addictions. I just can't understand how people can do it. And they don't realize how easy it is to fall into addictive behavior. And then you had talked about mind-altering things, whether it was drugs or alcohol. Television is the number one mind-altering thing in the world today. And people are so addicted to that, but they don't realize it. And here in Sun City, Arizona, where I live, the retirement capital of America, they'll come home and watch TV or surf the internet for hours on end. And it's a mind-altering kind of thing. They need purpose in their life to come alive again. Life's too short to be sitting in a house by yourself watching television or being online arguing with strangers about politics on social media.
Yeah, I agree with that. And those, although they're considered soft addictions, mm-hmm. they can be just as serious.
Correct.
In a different way, because, I said, there are good soft addictions, like those folks that are listening that are addicted to golf and are on that golf course. Hey, they're living their best life, and that's all good. And like with the drug addictions, like right now we have an opioid epidemic in your country and in mine. Mm-hmm. And young people are dropping off like flies. And it's really scary because they need their next fix. And with the fentanyl and the carfentanil out there, they're dying. I'm not sure the numbers, but I think you guys are losing like 200 people a day.
Wow.
It's a huge number, and we're probably 10% of them. And it's because what happens to the brain, the chemical shift that happens to the brain, I guess anyone that smokes cigarettes would understand it, because they've probably quit smoking cigarettes 1,000 times and haven't succeeded. Or if they did succeed, they know how hard it was. Mm-hmm. Magnify that by 1,000, and you've got the issue with the drugs. I know I did a speech once to my Rotary Club, and one of the gentlemen came up to me afterwards, and he said, thank you, because he said exactly what you just said. I didn't understand why people did drugs and why they just didn't stop, or why the parents didn't make their children stop. Or why don't the parents just tell them to stop doing it? And he goes, but you made me understand why you couldn't get your son to stop. It has to be the choice of the person. It's so hard to do, so it has to be their choice. And sometimes they have to go to rehab several times before they actually get out of it. I didn't go to rehab. And one time I was there as a guest when my son was there. They had a family thing and I went to it. And I asked one of the counselors how come I was able to just pull myself out of it. And he said, because you did what we call hitting a high bottom.
What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. What does that mean? It was just like, usually when you hit bottom, it's because things in life there's something so serious that you don't want this anymore. So for me, the two things were my son. And then the second thing that was what had some effect on me was I used to do this list, and it would be, okay, what are all the resources that you have that can help you achieve the things you want to achieve? Yes, I'm a type A personality. There's no question I crave productivity. So what are the things that you're doing that are helping you get to what you want? And then what are the things that are slowing you down or stopping you? And one of the things that I kept writing down was, you party too much. I party too much. I have all these plans of what I'm going to do on Saturday or Sunday, but I wake up hungover and I don't get out of bed. I watch TV all day.
Right.
And that was part of it too. I had started to do that probably before my son even started to go through his thing. And then when he started going through it, it was like, okay, there's a sign here. Let's find a way to move on.
If you had to live your life over again, is there anything you do differently?
No. I really think that I'm one of these people that sort of looks up at the universe and thinks everything happens for a reason. And there's a reason why I went through the journey that I went through. And I don't, if you said, can you redo part of life? If that didn't happen, then where would I be now? And the fact that I'm able to inspire and help folks through their curveballs and their best lives, I just feel like I'm honored that I get to be in the role that I'm in right now in life. But if I hadn't have experienced what I experienced and made the mistakes that I made, I wouldn't be in this position.
That's what I was going to ask. Have you received any rewards from doing this? Your public speaking, your book writing, your music performances and things like that?
My rewards are totally internal and they're amazing. Like I wake up every morning thinking, oh my God, life couldn't get better. This is when people learn, there's different courses where you can figure out what your values are, right? What are the things that are important to you? What are your main values? And family is one of my values. Giving is another one of my values. And for me to have a job where I can give back the way that I do and create all this stuff, like the songwriting is just going so wonderful. I say it's my superpower, and I figure it's because I talk so much. And that's all songs are, stories turned into lyrics. And so it ended up being something that I just really love to do.
Well, what advice would you give to people who are over 50, who are struggling to figure out what to do with their life?
I would say my biggest thing would be don't settle. Whatever you don't settle, keep looking and find what it is that you want. And a really big part of being successful at that is your internal dialogue. Your internal dialogue is so huge. Don't be telling yourself that because you tried it before and it didn't work, it's not going to work. Or because your spouse or your kids told you it's not going to work, just smile and say, I'm trying anyway. I have this line of pendants that I made. This one that I'm wearing today says the good life. But I have ones that say, be your own wings, or I got this. And I never take it off because I learned many years ago, I think it was Tony Robbins that said, if you're in your head, you're dead. I remember learning that if I'm in my head and I'm thinking negative, I have to change the thought. And so I read this book in the 70s by Gail Taylor, and she was an Olympic runner. And she basically taught, I stole this from her. And that's that if I'm in my head saying, oh, yeah, I can't really do that, or they won't want me, or blah, blah, blah. Then I go garbage in, garbage out. Garbage in, garbage out. That's my mantra. Garbage in, garbage out. And then I change the thought and say, of course they're going to want me. I've got this and this to offer, and it's going to be a win, and we're going to benefit each other. And then some people need that tactile item where they're rubbing something. And that was the point of my pendants, is that you just rub it and you get yourself out of your head and you you either use your mantra or you start telling yourself the positive story. And what I just shared with you, like that's my big piece of advice, does not happen overnight. It takes training. If you are finding that you're constantly sabotaging your dreams and you're constantly saying, oh, I can't do that, I can't, you're not going to go from I can't do that to I got this in one day.
Correct.
Think of it as you're going to university of shifting the thought process, or you're taking piano lessons, right? You take piano lessons, you got to practice every day. If you're trying to train your brain to think differently, you got to practice every day. And whether it takes 3 months, I'm reading that book, Atomic Habits, right now. And whether it takes you 3 months or 72 times or how many repetitions you have to do to shift something, you can do it.
Yes.
You can do it. Your brain in your 50s and 60s and 70s let you do it. There's a lady that finished her PhD at 81.
That's
right? There's no limits. Ageism is bunk. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, ageism. Oh my God. Like you get a 50, 60-year-old that has all of these years of experience that can stop you from making all these mistakes, and you're going to say, oh, they're too old. Honest to God, I think that's the stupidest thing I ever heard.
I've talked to people who are in their 80s who just cringe when they hear people who are like 65 say, I'm too old to do anything. You're 15 years younger than I am. Or even 20 years younger than I am. There's plenty of life left.
Hey, in the music industry, they do it at age 35. Oh my God, I hit my 30th birthday. Oh my God, I'm 35. I'll have to leave the music industry and become a construction worker because I didn't make it. You might not make it onto the top 40, but heck, there's a lot of things in the music industry that could put a bounce in your step.
Right.
And a construction worker puts a bounce in some people's step, but if it's not your thing, then don't settle. I just say don't settle. Make sure that you're after your passion.
Talking about self-talk, another thing that people often say is the way they're talking to themselves, I'm screwed up. I screw up all the time. I'm never going to make a difference. I'm never going to overcome this. It's never going to work out. And it's so essential to change that self-dialogue to get to the point where you believe that you've got it.
It's everything. It's a game changer. If you can change that self-dialogue, it is a game changer. And throughout my book, I keep saying, that was a game changer. That was a game changer. But the self-dialogue is just so huge because it gives you back your self-confidence, your self-belief, your self-esteem. Everything comes from what you're telling yourself. I've been studying personal growth and peak performance for 40 years. And it's a lifetime like that. So there's another one, lifelong learning, right? You don't stop learning when you come out of university or when you finish your first 5 years of training in your career. And then you say, okay, I learned enough. I'm going to stop now. No, you're still learning all through your life. And whether you're reinventing yourself, a lot of folks have to reinvent themselves because of COVID, right? COVID really shifted a lot of put people out of jobs, and technology is changing industries. Whether you got downsized because of technology or because two companies merged together, so be it. I look up at the universe and say, okay, why'd you do this? What's the next step that's going to be better, right? There's a reason, so let's make hay.
How can people connect with you if they would like to follow you or talk to you?
The best way is go to my website, which is www.gailtaylormusic.com. And Gail is spelled Gail.
Okay.
Taylormusic.com. And then once you go there, you'll have all the links to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Spotify to go listen to my music, Apple, YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. Everything's pretty much under Gail Taylor Music, except the only curve there is that, okay, so because I'm a songwriter and I produce my own music, I'm often not in my own songs. I record everything in Nashville. Sometimes I'm on keyboards, but sometimes I'm not. So I made my moniker Gail T as Charged. So if you're looking me up, look for Gail T as Charged and be careful because autospell's going to change Gail T to Guilty.
Guilty.
No, Gail T as Charged.
Okay, that's very good. So thank you for sharing your story today. It was inspirational, and I hope it helps other people realize that there's so much life left ahead of them, regardless of their age.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated it. You are great.
What a life Gail Taylor has led, from an addict to a highly successful financial advisor to relapsed addict to new career in her 60s. Because she has been down that road, both as an addict and as a mother caring for a child who is an addict himself, she has a real soft spot in her heart for the families of addicts. Not only did Gail have to deal with the guilt associated with watching her son fall into an addiction, she also had to learn about things like setting boundaries, understanding enabling, and the role codependency plays in dealing with the problem. She came to understand that addiction is truly a family disease. Gail also discovered how important music is to people by giving them a buffer from the information overload that plagues the world today. When she decided to become a keynote speaker, Gail was encouraged to write a book, so she picked a topic she knew very well. Her first book was titled Introduction to Financial Markets. Yet Gail still felt a tug in her heart to help people and their families who are recovering from addiction. So she chronicled her own experiences in her new book, Curveballs. The book conveys the message that if Gail can overcome the curveballs life threw at her, so can anyone else. She also addressed the need to live with passion and purpose. Above all, Gail encourages seasoned citizens to not settle for a so-so life. Rather, they need to actively pursue things that give them life instead of sabotaging their dreams. People struggling with a sense of purpose often need to change their self-talk to get a game-changing boost in self-confidence, self-belief, and self-esteem. People can connect with Gail by visiting her website at www.gailtaylormusic.com, where they can watch and listen to some of her music videos. Gail is also active on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and of course on her own YouTube channel at youtube.com/Gail Taylor Music. Her Curveballs book is available for pre-order now, and it will be released November 1st. That's all I have for this week's show. If you'd like help in identifying a purpose for your life or to get help planning your next steps, I'm offering a complimentary brainstorming session to members of the Forward from 50 Facebook community. For details, connect with me on Facebook or visit www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.